Alright, so this is the spoiler discussion for Sausage Party, and just to start things off, I was really surprised by the messages that they had in here, like the religion thing. It was obvious that it was religion, and I kind of wish I didn't mention that it was specifically religion. Although it's not even really a spoiler. Like if you couldn't figure out that that was religion, I'm sorry, but that should have been super obvious to you. Like honestly, but I feel like that was something that I mean, really, it's not even that big of a deal. Like it's religion, and it doesn't even matter if it's a part of the story. It's just a part of the message, which clearly, um, I would assume Seth Rogen and the other writers they're clearly not on the side of religion. So I thought that was interesting. I was surprised to have that message in there. I was super surprised, of course, by all the stereotypes and stuff, which I mentioned this in my spoiler-free review. My girlfriend despised this movie. Like when we got out, she was like, "If you like that, then we have to break up," because she's like this huge thing about race and stuff like that. And I can take a joke, honestly, and she can too, but to a very, very like seriously small extent. Like no joke, it's very minute extent, and they pushed it beyond most people's limits. Like I mean, if you've seen the movie at this point, if you're watching this, and they pushed it so insanely far. And when it started off, I thought it was okay. I was like, okay. When they did this stuff, it's like, okay, this guy's clearly. Also, Edward Norton doing that voice. I can't even think of the actual person he was mimicking now. It's Woody Allen. Him doing that voice really surprised me. I was like, holy crap. I knew it obviously wasn't Woody Allen, but I'm like, I was so surprised that Edward Norton was the guy doing that voice. I was like, holy crap, that was Edward Norton doing a Woody Allen impression. So that was interesting to find that out. But when they did that, with those two characters, with it was like Kareem Abdul Falah or something like that, Falafel, and then Sammy Bagel Jr. I was fine with their stereotypes. It was like, okay, they're clearly meant to be this, but that stereotype kind of develops where they actually bond over time, and it's like, okay, and they did it more for Kareem than they did Sammy, where obviously Kareem was like, oh, with Bun being like nude and a bunch of stuff like that, like tell your Bun to be quiet and stuff like that. You knew what the stereotype was meant to be, and I was still okay with that because I felt it wasn't as bad because it was like they actually at least developed the character. So it's like they have those stereotypes, but they show that they also don't. They have things that break away from those stereotypes, like them actually basically doing it. Yeah, at the end of the movie. But even before that, them just flat out bonding throughout the movie. I was like, okay, that actually I feel like that works most out of all the stereotypes that we saw. And then of course they have like Firewater and Mr. Grits and stuff like that. And it's like they're kind of one note, and they always have this where anyone, if there's any Native American character, it's always some person of a different race doing this for a Native American person. So that could affect people. For me, it was like I, meh, like it meant nothing to me. Like it upset my girlfriend, but I was like that. I don't know. I mean, it sucks, but I don't think a Native American would have done that anyway. So they kind of would have to get someone random to do it. To be totally honest, when you think about it. But yeah, it's just they got all the they pretty much got all the people they knew because when they went through like the voice actors, I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was this person or that person. So they kind of just got all their friends to do the voices, which I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. They got like all the people that did kind of either their other movies or from back in the day and stuff like that that have been in movies they've written and stuff. So I was like, oh, that's actually interesting. So it made sense why they had those voice actors, but for me, it was like, some of the stereotypes work. Most of them, kind of didn't, I guess. And I guess that's part of why it's sort of like the for me, where it's kind of funny, but it's not so funny. And like I laughed more in the beginning than I did, as the movie kind of went on. Like I laughed more when they were just dropping f bombs over and over, honestly, than I was when they were doing the race stuff. And I still laughed, like I said early on. I still thought it was funny, and then some of the other jokes I thought still kind of worked, and then it was just like some things just didn't. Like when they did how was it when they had like tequila and stuff, and it was just like it's supposed to be like a drunk Mexican dude. I was like, that one doesn't really work for me. It's just excuse me, it was like, I don't know, like that one just didn't work for me. Um, Being black, I thought the Mr. Grits thing, I thought that was fine. I thought it was funny. Of course they gave him the generic dialogue and him smoking weed and stuff like that, and I was like, you know, the Native American guy and the black guy are the ones who smoke and stuff. So I was like, not so funny. But him talking, them doing the joke about basically white people taking over, for black people and stuff, and him saying the cracker lines. I thought that was really funny. I was like, that I thought worked. I was like, that's a funny line to me because it was more about history than it was about just the stereotype of the character, and that's what I like more. And I was like, I think those jokes are better. Like it's still based on racism and stuff like that, but I was like, I think those jokes are better than the stereotypical jokes. For the most part, at least I thought they worked better. And then, like I said, some of the stereotype stuff worked. Um, like the Kareem character was one of the stereotypes that we kept seeing throughout the movie, but I think it was spread out. Like they did the virgin olive oil and stuff. I was like, all right, I think that's a funny joke, and I don't know, maybe because it's meant to be a stereotype on terrorists. That's probably why I didn't care that much about that joke. Especially when they did that, it was very specific who they were talking about. It's like, oh, that's supposed to be about like suicide bombers, and that's kind of the thing. And it was like that. Probably why I didn't care about that one as much because I was like, that's clearly who the. Especially when they did that, because at first it was like, oh, it's just this, and then it specifically went to the 42 version thing, and I was like, oh, that's like very specific people within this group of people, like so that I just laughed and I was like, because it's clearly specific to a certain set of people that obviously have done some pretty bad things in recent history, and it's kind of like, man, maybe that's why I can easily laugh at that one, and then the other ones I thought were subtle enough, and they were stereotypes, but that joke is freaking real. Like that was actually realistic, and I don't know, maybe that's why I laughed so much with that character because I was like, that is a stereotype, but that's like 100% accurate. Like some of the other stereotypes were like just racist stereotypes, but that one, like when he was like telling like, oh, you tell the bun to shut up and stuff. That's not, of course, across the board, but I guess I didn't see it as like Americans or people from that country who come to America and stuff. I just saw this like the people where it's like if you're from that country, that's really what it's like, and it sucks. Like it really sucks, but I don't know. I guess because that was actually a bit accurate, that's why it made me laugh. And I don't know. Maybe that's something about me, but I don't know. I didn't think about people that moved from the country to here. I was thinking about, like I said, once I got to the 42 virgin olive oil thing, I was like, I only think of like the very specific set of like basically this is meant to like stereotype terrorists. That's honestly how I looked at it. Once I got to that point, I was like, this isn't even a stereotype of basically, because you have terrorists in all these different places. And it's like, we have people, which obviously not everyone's a terrorist because that's just freaking stupid. Which I know a lot of people love to say that. But it's like, you have a very small sect of people who are actually terrorists, and that's kind of the big thing. And I've heard that joke a million times before, like, people talking about the 42 virgins and all that stuff, but I just like the way they did it in this, and I thought that one was fine. And also because that character got developed, I was like, well, I'm a little, at least a little bit better with it. And then, like I said, once I kind of sect it to this is specifically about like the worst people, it was almost fine. Like people that just have no regard for human life, I was like, I'm almost totally fine with this stereotype because that's all I'm seeing is just like the worst people. Um, you know, within that, and I guess when I say it so generically, that makes it sound super bad. But obviously, I mean like actual terrorists, not just like anyone of a certain race or anything like that. Because that's how it sounds when I say it that way. Now I think about it, like it sounds super generic when I say it, but once it got to the 42 version thing, I was like, yep, I'm only thinking of literally terrorists. But it was kind of half and half where it's meant to be like, oh, it's everyone, and then that like once they did the virgin thing, like I said, it just shrunk to me. I was like, oh, that's not even these people versus these people. This is just like boop, this tiny sect of people. So that's kind of how I saw it. Maybe that's why I didn't hate that one as much. And then it wasn't even super duper crazy anyway, because the characters actually got developed, and then everyone else, it was just the kind of one note stereotype. Um, the Canadian stereotype I loved. I thought that was hilarious because everyone does that one, and it's like the nicest stereotype you could possibly have is that Canadians are super nice, and they just say sorry and excuse me. So that one I thought was great. Plus the beer was called A with a question mark, and I thought that was so funny. I was like, that's just the silliest little Canadian stereotype reference, and I like that. I don't know if Canadians hate that. I think I've heard people say it's like it's somewhat annoying. I know the "how's she going" thing can be annoying to people, but the A and being super polite, that's a good stereotype to have. So I don't know. Like that's so weird. Like that's such a weird in between stereotype. Like I don't know if I shouldn't support that stereotype or if I should because it's actually a nice stereotype. Because it's just people being nice. It's such a weird one, but I actually like that. I was like, that's a funny one. It's just a 6 pack of beer, and they're just like, oh, sorry, excuse me, sorry, and the side is just A with the maple leaf. So I was like, that one's actually pretty funny to me. So I really like that one. Um, Nick Kroll as the douche I thought was hilarious. I was really surprised that that was him, by the way. And the reason they chose him was because he plays super douchey characters, but he's actually a nice person. Like, if you watch The League, he's kind of a dick in that show. He has his own show, the Nick Kroll Show, and he always does like a bunch of like Jersey stereotypes and just a bunch of really silly characters. So that's why they had him do that. I didn't even recognize his voice, um, and that was just kind of funny. I was like, oh, that was him. But he was crazy and just insane going through that whole movie. I was like, holy crap, he's like killing everybody and drinking, you know, anything that has juice or whatever in it. He's like killing them and drinking them and stuff like that. It's just nuts. I was like, man, this is freaking like kind of effed up a little bit. He's like killing people and stuff, and just being like an insane villain, you know, going through the movie. But I loved the food jokes for, like, especially the queso one. That was super funny to me. And then they did the last one, which they obviously were like making fun of themselves with that joke, where he was like, um, "I relish the fact that you had the mustard to catch up with me," or something like that. And then he looked over and was like, yeah, that's right, you shut up over there. So I like that they were making fun of it at the very end. But the queso one was my favorite one because I really didn't see that one coming. I was like, wow, that was actually a good one. And he even points out like, that was a stretch. So that one I really liked because it was funny. But um, going through the movie and having it split between like Frank and then his buddy, who like I can't remember anyone's name except for like Frank, Kareem, and Sammy Bagel Jr. Or Brenda. It was Brenda Bond. That's what it was. So going through the supermarket adventure and having that split with the outside adventure. I mentioned my spoiler-free review. I was really surprised by that. I thought the whole movie was going to be these foods are trying to survive inside this house, and they have to. I found out later on that they even escaped from the house because I didn't know that until maybe like 2 weeks before I even saw the movie. That they actually have a story within the supermarket. I was like, oh, I thought this whole movie was in the outside world, and they were trying to get back to the supermarket. But I really liked the outside world stuff. It was just as funny as it was in the trailer. It was really crazy. And then we had this, this lone little hot dog out in the world and stuff. And then he runs into the dude who does the bath salts. Um, I like that stuff. I thought that was really cool. And they have that crazy adventure. But I was like, man, I kind of wish we got way more of that because that's what I really thought the whole movie was about. And then it's like it's not nearly as much of a movie as you would expect, and it's mostly this supermarket journey, and also that kind of they do technically show it because they have like the Irish potato and um, the tomato and stuff. So you see it in the trailer, but it's really simple. It's like, oh, it's a potato singing an Irish song, but you don't realize like, oh, that's just the tip of the racial stereotype iceberg. It just seemed like, oh, the potato singing that song, and I don't think I even noticed that the tomato had an accent when I first heard it in the trailer. It was just like, holy crap, this is nuts. Like, I didn't even, you don't even pay attention. Um, but yeah, I was really disappointed that that wasn't a bigger part of the movie. I was really upset by that. I was like, man, I love that so much in the trailer. And then it's like, oh, this kind of sucks. Like, most of the movies at the supermarket. And, I was glad they kind of brought that together, at least in the end as well, when they actually fight off all the people by hitting them with the bath salts, and they actually see that the food is alive and stuff. So I like that they kind of brought it together, and they have like this crazy war where they killed like a ton of freaking people. Like they just killed a bunch of humans. So that was a really crazy ending to the movie as well. But you know, I was like, oh, it kind of sucks that this isn't more of the movie, but I still enjoyed what we got from that, and just how crazy it was. And they had like the condom thing, and that was another big thing where, you know, and a lot of people have brought this up, like what is and what isn't alive, and you kind of just have to let that go. But it was really weird. Like the one scene a lot of people point out is when Frank was going towards the book and those knives were there. It was really weird because I was surprised by that too. And I remember hearing another review and they mentioned that, like, you know, they were surprised the knives weren't alive. And I was like, I thought the exact same thing, because I thought the knives are going to say something. They're going to like turn around, or their eyes are going to open or something. The knives are going to say something as he's climbing them, and then nothing happened. I was like, that's really weird, because they had like toilet paper is alive, and you know, the condom was alive and stuff. And it's like, but knives aren't alive? That's weird. So that was definitely one of those things, because it was like a ton of weird stuff was alive. You know, it wasn't just food. They made it, you know, made a point of having, you know, other little stuff. I think they only did it for the jokes. I'm pretty sure it was only the condom and the toilet paper that weren't actual food items. I think everything else was literally a food item. So I think that was really just so that they could kind of fit those jokes in there. But it automatically brought up that question, like, well, what else is alive, and you know, stuff like that. And you know, you know, like I said, that was kind of a disappointment for me. I was like, man, I really wish most of the movie was this, and maybe that would have been better for other people as well, like, because that would have been, I guess, in a sense, less racial stereotypes, because it wouldn't be all the food. But like I said, for me, that wasn't as big of a deal. Sometimes it landed, sometimes it just didn't. But ultimately, I was like, you know, going through it, I was like, oh, it sucks that we don't get to see more of the outside world. That's what I was hoping for. It was a lot of stuff just in the supermarket. And then also, I mentioned this in the spoiler-free review, it started to just hit normal movie notes, and that really sucked for me. Like, when it got to, I guess it was when they really introduced the religion thing, and you know what they're talking about, because I'm pretty sure it's when they have the first argument about it, um, with Brenda and Frank. It's like, it's the sad moment of the movie, and it's like, oh, they have this really serious argument, and it's about religion, and like, oh, we have to believe in the gods, and you know, the gods are fake, and this and that, and I'm trying to tell you the truth. And it's them having their breakup moment, which is really sad. And it has some funny jokes in there, because they argue and they have Brenda talk about like the eggplants and all that stuff, and it was silly jokes. And you know, I like that, but then it was like, oh, this is just like the movie moment. It's just like, ugh. They had like, they put in the typical sad thing, because like I felt like they could have just had a moment where they agreed, and I think I would have just enjoyed that a little bit better. I guess, I don't know, but it was like a typical movie moment. And after that, it was really cool, because they had the little montage with the meatloaf, and I love that. I thought that was a really funny reference, and like, I guess pseudo weird cameo, I guess, if you think about it. But I like that moment. I thought that was really fun. I was like, all right, I like this little montage thing that they have. Um, but I felt like it was just kind of hidden typical moments, or there was just stuff that wasn't super entertaining. It was either because the jokes didn't land, or it's because it was serious. And I think at one point, kind of during that middle section, it was a bit of both. And it was like, the jokes are either too stereotypical even for me, and it's just like, meh, not even, you know, not that funny, or you know, right after that, or in between two of those types of jokes, it was a more serious moment that I felt was just a generic movie moment that we get in every movie. You have your sad moment where the main characters don't want to be friends, or don't want to be together, or whatever. And I'm like, ugh, I just wasn't expecting that for this type of movie. And you know, it seems like it kind of falls into that, because it didn't seem like it had that early on, and they have like the crazy stuff when, like after they have the crazy battle scene, basically the battlefield scene where it's like they're on, you know, the war zone and stuff, and I forgot exactly what movie that mimics. After that, there's still like a good couple of minutes. I'd say it's a good maybe 10 minutes. You know, it gets to the whole family, or the food being at home in the woman's house and all that stuff, and it still has those elements of like, you know, it's just really crazy and stuff. And then I feel like after that scene, once they start that real adventure, it starts to get real typical. It's like, oh, they're going from here to here, and then they have this moment in between, and then when it switches to the little hot dog on his adventure, it's like, okay, now this we still don't know what's gonna happen, because he gets the dude on bath salts, and then this guy can see all the things are alive, and it's like, I don't know what's gonna happen here, and it's really crazy. And then it seems like he's gonna die in the one scene, and of course he doesn't. And that I figured was gonna happen, but that type of thing. I was like, all right, it's back to who knows what's gonna happen, and then it jumps to the supermarket thing. It's like, all right, they're still going from A to B. Then they have their argument where Frank is left alone and everyone else goes back, and there's still, like I said, funny jokes in between. But it was just like, ugh, it's either I get a couple funny jokes here, some jokes don't land, and then very generic stuff for me. And like that was the one thing that really disappointed me. I was like, man, I'm just not laughing, or I just don't really care that much. Like I'm still interested in the story to see how everything plays out, but it was just hitting the typical notes for me, and that does bother me in a movie when everything's so unexpected in the beginning, and then it gets a little typical. And maybe it might seem like nitpicking, I don't know, but I was so like I was still in the movie, and then it was like, oh, this sucks that they hit the typical sad scene, but that was just something I noticed, and when that happened, I felt like it was a big chunk. It's just I was just like, eh. And it still had good stuff in between, because like even though they had that, like I said, the typical argument, they had the silly jokes about what Brenda could fit and stuff, and then the meatloaf thing I really loved. But it was just the supermarket thing got typical to me, and I was like, I wasn't expecting anything typical from this movie, and I got way more of that than I expected. Excuse me. Plus some of the stereotypical jokes that just didn't work for me anyway. So that's how it is for me. Would love to know everything you guys thought about this movie, whether you loved it, hated it, in between, how you felt, funny, all that stuff. So please comment below, let me know. And of course, thanks for watching.